I'm Lindsay Bill.
And I'm Tammy Price, and we are from Shifting into High Gear. And today we're going to be talking about the guiding principles to a practice of wholeness. And the reason why Lindsay and I do this work, the reason why we've developed the guiding principles to a practice of wholeness is to highlight or shine a light on what it takes to really come into a place of healing, right? Long-term come into a place of healing. And so the first actually, I'll just share the screen so that everybody can see the guiding principles. And then we're going to talk about them briefly because they're more than just an intellectual understanding, right? And so we want to, when we talk about them, what we want to do is really activate the parts of you that need to hear or need to experience what it is that we're talking about so that you can fully embody it and then change the direction in which you move in the world, if you so desire, right? If you so desire. So the first one is attunement. We talked about attunement yesterday. Hopefully you downloaded one of the earlier videos where we talked about attunement in detail. And just quickly, attunement is the ability to listen to the voices of your whole self. And so Linz and I talk about each of us being comprised of three different languages: the language of the mind, which is through interpretation; the language of the body, which is through sensation; and the language of the soul, which is through surrender. And usually what happens is that we've got the ability to activate all three of those at the same time. But what happens is that we allow one of them to dominate. And so one of them becomes like a spoiled child, a little bit of an entitled child. And over time, that entitled child elbows out or eclipses the other parts of ourselves. And so it's kind of like, you're at the kitchen counter and you're a mom and you're cooking dinner and you've got a child pulling on your ends of your shirt. And you're like, yeah, not now, not now, not now. And so what we do is we've actually been trained to not attune. Our organic state through training is not to attune. And so attunement is an intentional action that needs to take place. So those two parts of yourself, generally speaking, that have not been attuned to are the language of surrender and the language of sensation. And what's happened is we've slowly over time, by not attuning to them, relegated them like children into the corner of the room where they either numb out or throw a temper tantrum to be seen and heard. And so what we'd like to do is casually invite that, I shouldn't say casually, intentionally invite the voices that have been eclipsed over time back into the center of the room, attune to them. So all that really means is when they speak, when they activate their voices, to see and hear them through bringing our awareness to whatever it is that they're saying and then taking action in support of them. And so that's kind of attunement in a nutshell. It's definitely a practice. It is definitely something that needs to be intentionally activated and then action in support of. But yeah, that's attunement in a nutshell. Next.
Absolutely. And it is like, I think that one's the first one on our list simply because that's the foundation on which the rest of these fall. If you are not in attunement, then anything else that you're doing is just for the sake of doing it. You're not actually having any intention behind it, And when we start to teach this and attuning to certain things, we really focus on becoming an observer of the mind. Like, do you have healthy dialogue? Or, one of the things that we always say is that the voice of the mind, more often than not, is not truthful and not supportive. And so are you able to understand when that dialogue has kicked in, and are you able to change it and take action to create supportive and healthy dialogue? And then from there, we go into the next, linear step, which is attuning to the sensations of the body. Drop into it, feel it, really familiarize yourself, create a connection and a relationship with that deeper aspect of yourself that we have put off in the corner of the room. Invite it back in, invite the sensation in. And see where that takes you. And then we go and dive fully into the soul, into the language of surrender. And this is where I'm like, become a yes man. Say yes to every opportunity. Say yes to absolutely everything, regardless of how scared or fearful you might be. Just say yes. And once you have activated all three parts individually, then you bring it back in, you rein them in and say like, okay, like I really want to play around with this aspect or play around with this aspect. And once you have a really familiar relationship with each area, it's so much easier to recognize when you have fallen out of attunement or out of alignment and bring yourself back. So it really is the first on this list for a very, very important reason.
Yeah. I love the next one too, own where you operate from. Are you okay, Linz, if I just take away with it?
I love
Run away
it.
with
Yeah,
this?
run with it.
Here's the interesting thing. We've all probably heard of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and the idea that we're all on a path. And for a lot of our path, like it's like almost akin to like Dorothy on the Yellow Brick Road, right? She's living in a house in Kansas. Hurricane comes or tornado comes, uproots the home, deposits her on the Yellow Brick Road, and there she is on this Yellow Brick Road. And the whole time she's on the Yellow Brick Road, she's coming up against the Wicked Witch of the East and the Wicked Witch of the West, and all of these things. And in her mind, she's like, well, I'm perfectly okay because the wizard at the end of the Yellow Brick Road is going to be the person that brings me home to myself. And then she gets there and pulls back the curtain, and it's a little old man, and it's not a wizard. And then she realizes that she has the power the whole time to go home to herself. And so that's kind of the whole idea around the hero's journey. Owning where you operate from, for me, is even before you step foot on that hero's journey. Because before any of us step foot on this hero's journey, we've had a training ground. And that training ground has been filled with lack of attunement, not feeling seen and heard by our parents, or having full experiences around being abandoned and rejected. And so for my experience, my mom was pregnant with me and gave birth, and my dad didn't know I existed till a few months later. In that moment, energy has been passed on to me, and now I'm operating from a place of abandonment. And so as I step out onto this yellow brick road of life, I'm calling in experiences that will trigger the abandonment and rejection within me, because it's what my training ground was. It was what I knew, right? And so I'm going to do that until I have the awareness to not call those experiences in, or have the awareness to not feed those experiences. But here's the thing: most of us don't own where we operate from. I didn't, for 40 some odd years, own that I operated from a place of abandonment, and that every experience that I had in my life was only to feed the abandonment that resided within me, to fuel that fire, because it was what I knew, right? Abandonment and rejection was what I knew. And every experience I had in life was going to fuel that fire, because I didn't know that there was the opportunity to live on the other side of the abandonment and rejection. And one of the things that we've incorporated into our work is a question that Heather Plett asked me one time, or an iteration of a question Heather Plett asked me one time, which was, if you were operating from a place of being 100% worthy, would you still do this or do this differently? Well, to me, being worthy is in direct contrast to operating from a place of abandonment and rejection. And if I didn't own that I operated from that place, it would not be as, it's still not easy, but it would not be as motivating for me to change, right? So this is where I say, cellular buy-in of our training ground. Embody the training ground. What was your training ground before you put your foot on that yellow brick road and started to call in the experiences of life? Because whatever that training ground is will be what shows up for you on that yellow brick road. Right?
And it's so funny because our mind plays games with us. And so it really has told us that the way that we are perceiving the world is protecting us. It's keeping us safe. It's making sure that we don't get hurt, or that our emotions don't go too far on that spectrum of pain and sadness and grief. And so we've created this thought process, this neurological pathway that makes us believe that, that it's protecting us and it's keeping us safe, when really it's actually holding us back from reaching our true potential. And so being able to embody where you operate from is such a key component in this, because until you truly resonate with the idea that the way you perceive the world, the actions that you're taking, the way you react to situations are part of that training ground and are part of your abandonment and rejection showing up, part of your experience showing up, and being able to change that narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's like resistance is the opposite of growth,
absolutely. And that
right?
kind of takes us into like the next area of the law of attraction, because it's like if you're operating from this place of abandonment and rejection, we're calling in these experiences that are keeping us there, rather than, like we said, where you step into, that wholeness perspective, and opportunities start feeding into your life that are in support of your wholeness and are in support of your highest self. The opposite can also take place, where if we stay in that training ground, if we stay in that place that we're operating from, we're also calling in those experiences that are going to feed into that story. And whether it's us abandoning and rejecting ourselves, or us projecting that abandonment and rejection, saying that someone else has abandoned and rejected us, those are two of the same things. And so it's really about, attuning to that, owning where we're operating from, and then utilizing that to call in experiences that are helping us evolve and that are bringing about our highest potential.
Yeah, it's taking action in support of the wholeness instead of taking action in support of the abandonment and rejection. And when you start to embody taking action in support of the wholeness, you're now going to call in more experiences that will support that. Because
Mhm.
the universe doesn't, here's the funny thing, like people say to me, well, I put out to the universe and the universe is going to provide. But here's the thing, the universe only provides to you based on where you're operating from,
Mhm.
right? You're in co-creation with the universe. The
Yes.
universe isn't the all and mighty powerful. There is responsibility, which leads us to the next one, responsibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So everything comes back to self. It's so easy for us to be like, this person did something to me, or this happened on the road today. And it just fuels that internal flame of abandonment and rejection. And so it's about taking that responsibility and being like, how did I call this experience into me? Where was I operating from that I called this chaos in, or called this argument in, or called this roadblock in? And taking that responsibility and being able to really claim your power back, and
Hmm.
bringing that universal love back into you.
Yeah, it's really
And
about great love returning to self.
yeah, a
Yeah,
thousand percent.
because every time we extend blame and shame, this actually ties into the next one too, forgiveness. Every time, anytime we go out here and go, well, you're the responsible for how I feel.
Mhm,
You did this to me.
mhm.
Why did this happen to me? Why does this always happen to me? Every time we do that, we're taking this great love, energy of love, and we're bringing it out here. Well, in order to be whole, healthy, happy people, the great love needs to reside right here.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's everything comes back to self. Like, can we get to the place where we believe that everything in our life that happens, we own responsibility for? And that's a tough one. You get, I get that, that'll be hard for some people because we all have experiences that, we want to believe that we had no responsibility in. And, for me, like, and that, that's one of the things that, you know, it's like going over the cliff. And we talk about this with our students a lot. It's like going over the cliff. You know, we can't say to ourselves, yes, I'm responsible for all of these, but I'm that one thing I'm not responsible for. Right.
right.
Because here's the thing, even if somebody did something to, if somebody, we did something that we perceive they did something to us, um, and we want to blame them for how we feel. I mean, that's perfectly okay, right? You're going to do what you're going to do. But the minute you take 100% responsibility for that situation, and you come into that relationship and you say to that person, I'm going to take 100% responsibility,
Mhm,
chances are that person is also going to go, oh my gosh, that's so lovely they took 100% responsibility, but I'm not going to let them be in that by themselves. I'm
mhm.
now going to jump in and I'm going to take responsibility too. And now you've got an expansive responsibility that's taking place, and that shifts the energy outwardly. I'm getting
Absolutely.
the chills as I say that. It's the difference between this and the feeling of doing this, right?
Mhm,
Big difference,
mhm.
right? So yeah,
Yeah,
forgiveness, same thing, implies someone has the power to do something to us and eclipses responsibility. And so, for me, I don't know about you, Linz, but I feel like, you know, um, I don't need to forgive somebody if I'm taking 100% responsibility.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way. And, forgiveness is one of those words that we hear a lot, like forgive your past or, make peace with things and just let it go. And
Let
that's
it go.
not always,
Let it go.
yes, let it go. That's not always the best option, like forgiveness means that, somebody has to say sorry to you. And if that person doesn't say sorry, then we're still angry about the situation. And that's not helping us at all. Just recognize that, like, same thing, like, take responsibility for how you're feeling and recognize that everyone is doing the best that they absolutely can from where they're operating from. And
Mhm.
when you can switch that mentality, it really takes away the personalization and the emotion from the situation, because now we're looking at the world as like, okay, this person is operating from this place. And I called this experience in to recognize where I'm operating from and to give me awareness about where I still have opportunity to grow and overcome old mentalities and old thought processes.
Beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
So it's really about um, taking that responsibility and being like, you have done nothing wrong to me, because I can recognize that you're doing the best from where you're operating from.
Mhm.
And my reaction or my response to you is a clear indicator of where I'm operating from. And so I'm going to take 100% responsibility from where I'm operating from and how that has created this narrative or this story about the situation that took place.
Yeah.
But when you have that, it's like even talking about it, you can feel that weight lift off your shoulders. It's the same thing. It's going from this to being like this, or from this and being expansive, because now you've opened up all this opportunity to say, like, nothing went wrong. It's just showing me opportunity of where I still have the ability to grow.
Yeah. Totally agree. Holding a mirror back up to yourself, right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
that kind of ties into the next one of interpretation, is like,
Oh.
how are we interpreting our events? The mind is neither truthful or supportive. And so what stories are we telling ourselves as we go out into the world? That, is it supportive of us or is it not? And how are we interpreting our external world? And do you see a reflection of your internal world being reflected as your external world?
Mm. Hmm. Yeah. So interpretation, just to let's go back and clarify just for a second, because we're comprised of three languages: interpretation, sensation, and surrender.
Mhm.
Interpretation is the one thing that the majority of us give over most of the power to. And so again, it's like this entitled child who feels like it is the curator of everything. And so for me, it's like, if I'm allowing that part of myself to speak for all three parts of myself, then what's happening is neither truthful nor supportive, because it's basing its interpretation on the sum of our life experiences, and not based on what's fact or fiction. So for example, if someone loses their job, a lot of the times if someone gets fired from their job in a rejection or abandonment, it gets triggered. They're fearful of not being able to support themselves. They start to run stories in their mind like, I can't put food on the table for my family, I'm not worthy of, where am I going to find another job, I'm too old, or whatever it is, imposter syndrome shows up. And none of that's truthful. The truth is, what happened, you lost your job. Anything beyond that is a story that we create, and we do that all day long by processing things through the interpretation of our mind, which is the sum of our life experiences. So like, from getting a flat tire to going to the bank and your debit card not work, or going to the grocery store and trying to pay for your groceries and your debit card not working, and it triggering the abandonment, and then the story that rises up inside of that, and then we get on the phone and we start sharing that story, and all of that's energy that
Mhm.
affects the global community, all of
Yeah.
it. And so for me, it's really getting into a place of what happened versus the story that I create. Are we perfect human beings? No. Because I allowed my mind to run the show for most, if not all, of my life, there's still times where I'll run away with the story. But
Mhm.
for the majority of the time, I'm able to pull myself back, really recognize what happened, and not find myself going in and creating stuff that's neither truthful or supportive of my wholeness.
Absolutely.
But
And
again,
if you find yourself like in that space where the mind is running away, you'll be able to recognize it. It's that tailspin of thoughts where we overanalyze and overprocess everything. That's time to tap into your toolbox and dive into the language of the sensation of the body and surrender. It's really that opportunity where you now recognize that the mind has taken over more real estate than it should, and it's time to engage or activate these other aspects of ourselves.
Hmm.
And, one of the things that I have struggled with just being on this journey is not so much that my mind brings in negative interpretation, but sometimes I also find myself over analyzing things of like, where am I operating from and how am I doing with this? And did I embody today? And so it's kind of like the other swing of that pendulum where it's like I'm being supportive and I'm having this dialogue within me that's super um, enriched with my growth and my evolution, but it's still allowing the mind to dominate. And so recognizing, even when I've shifted into that space, to bring it back and embody everything that I know. It's one thing to have these guiding principles and having these
Hmm.
practices in place, but am I able to interject when I've noticed interpretation overrunning, regardless of whether it's negative or positive, and be able to drop that down into the embodiment and reawaken the language of sensation and surrender?
Beautiful. And I think the other piece to that, like, is that we have the 25, what's the name of it, Linz? Help me out. The guide
Oh,
that,
our wholeness guide. So yeah, we've created an amazing giveaway, and it's 25 activities that are based on bringing you back to wholeness. And so if you're coming into this space where I'm feeling a little off, I'm feeling like I've dove into one of the three areas too much, open this activity guide, pick one of the activities. They're separated really easily into activities for the mind, activities for the body, activities for the soul. And so you just tap into one of them and bring it into your daily life. They're super easy activities. A lot of people think that these wholeness, activities need to be something that needs to be implemented into their life. And people kind of get shied away from that because we don't have time and I still have all of these things. Once again, watching that interpretation take off. But it's not about that. It's about embodying everything that you're already doing. So if your kids are wanting to go to the park, um, do you sit and go on the swings with them and allow yourself to feel that childlike thing? When you're driving in the car and your kids are screaming in the background, are you able to just kind of like tune them out and come back into your body and feel the sun on your face as you're stuck in traffic? If the radio is on and your favorite song comes on, do you allow yourself to sing every word, or are you like just kind of like hiding there, shrunk down, singing on the inside, but not allowing that to come out?
yeah, if it's snowing, and the other day it was snowing, and I'm like, wouldn't it be great just to go out and like stand in the snow in my bare feet?
Yeah, I know
Feel
it's,
the sensations that rise up inside of me, right?
yeah.
There's
So
so
yeah,
much.
there's so many activities that you can implement to help with this area of interpretation.
Totally.
And it's not about quieting the mind. That's not what we want to do at all, because quieting the mind is an idea of rejecting a part of ourself as well. So it's about understanding the mind, becoming an observer of how we interpret and perceive the world. And is there opportunity for growth or enhancement and evolution in that space where we can create healthier narrative within ourselves
Yeah.
and welcome that back in? So much of what is around out there right now is the death of the ego and quieting the ego. But ego is really there to support us. Ego is there to help us take action, to believe that we can achieve anything regardless of what stands in front of our way. It helps protect us in certain areas. And so we really don't want to reject the interpretation. We don't want to turn off the mind. We just want to embrace it and nurture it and train it in a different way so that it's helping us rather than hurting us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually, the way I kind of liken it is like, I want three players to come to the Monopoly board, and I want all three players to have an equal share of the property
Mhm.
and have fun together, as opposed to one player buying up all the properties and saying to the other two, I'm the winner and I'll always be the winner. And don't you ever put your hand on my properties.
Yeah, just keep going around the board until you run out of money.
Right? Totally.
Yeah.
Addictions and validations are a really cool thing to bring into awareness. So for an example about it would be, and we put a picture of a flower there because Linz and I have a flower exercise that we put people through so that they can identify what they're using as a way to feel whole, and what are we creating inauthentic relationships with. So for example, if you don't feel whole and you pick up a glass of wine and you drink it, and at the end of that glass you feel your inhibitions starting to slip away, and you start to show up more in integrity with who you think you are, the minute you so that, and then maybe that turns into, oh, I'm going to drink more wine, because if I drink more, then maybe I'll even show up as more of who I am. And so in that moment we've created an inauthentic relationship with the glass of wine, because we're using it as a way to feel more whole, right? And I'm going to tell you, like, every time we have an addiction, or anytime we are using something as a way to feel more whole, it falls apart, and I use Tiger Woods as a great example of that. I call it the Tiger Woods syndrome, because here was a guy who was the winningest man in golf, and he had a beautiful wife and two amazing kids and all the money, and he didn't feel entirely worthy of that. And so instead what happened is he went out and had a relationship outside of his marriage, until that, again, didn't satisfy him. And then he went out and had another. And then, as we know in the story, he had multiple relationships. It fell apart. His wife found out about it, and he ended up having, I think, into the surgeries now into the double digits. And so when we create an authentic relationship with something, it's going to fall apart. In Tiger Woods's experience, it was, he created inauthentic relationships with women as a way
Mhm.
to feel better about himself. And
Yeah.
he sabotaged. And so we all have these things. Money is another one. A lot of people use money as a way to feel more whole. They look at their bank account, they have money, they feel better about themselves. They look at their bank account, they don't have money, and they don't feel good about themselves. And so when we have an inauthentic relationship with money, almost always it falls apart.
Mhm.
People who win the lottery, they ask the universe to provide. They buy a lottery ticket, the universe gives it to them, but they don't feel worthy of receiving it, and 6 months later they've got no money left.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really mindful in my own personal work around, what am I, and I do this exercise all the time, where I'm observing and coming into relationship with what I am using, right? you
Mhm.
know am I using, my makeup that I put on in the morning as a way to feel more whole, and going out into the world and presenting myself as this whole, healthy, happy person, when I don't fully believe it, when I look at myself in the mirror without makeup, you
Totally.
know and so I'm consistently, taking a tick and check of my own life and seeing, what am I creating inauthentic relationships with, and where do I need to do some work. And I could tell you the list is long, and I guarantee you this will keep me working to the end of my life. But it's fun. It's fun to witness yourself beginning to enroll in creating authentic relationships with things, and then be able to step back and go, okay, so I'm going to firm that up. I'm going to create a strong foundation with whatever that thing is, and I'm no longer going to use it as a way to feel whole.
Totally. And I agree. It is so much fun. And a key point to remember is like, there's going to be points in time where we probably use everything in an inauthentic way. That list is ever changing. And one day you might use makeup authentically because it's making you just feel really good. Like you just want your eyes to pop with your mascara, or want to have that flushed look on your cheeks.
Hmm.
And then there's other days that you are using it inauthentically because you have a blemish on your face and you don't want somebody to make fun of that when you go out, or you think that somebody's going to be staring at it the entire
Totally.
time that you're talking. And so another big one is food.
Oh yeah,
Do you sit
food.
do you sit and savor your food, or do you emotionally eat and just shove everything into your face and then recognize 30 minutes later that you still feel the same way, but now you have a huge bellyache? you know um and so it becomes really fun, and this is where that attunement and embodiment really comes into daily practice, because you'll be able to feel the minute that you wake up in the morning, like, do I need to what practice do I need to engage into? And as I go through my day, like, am I using this authentically or inauthentically? And so it really becomes like this beautiful, like, awareness game, almost like it's a lifestyle that
Hmm.
starts to change, and really being aware of those things, and once again having that self-compassion and that gentleness about yourself to be like, okay, like today I am using this inauthentically, and being able to like stop and engage in something else and
Hmm.
utilizing something else that feels more authentic.
Or maybe, that's, for me, it's like a lot about awareness too. Like, you have a breakup, and like the proverbial thing that we do when we have a breakup is go to the freezer and grab a carton of ice cream, right? And And so for me, it's like, I'm going to the freezer, I'm going to open the freezer, I see the carton of ice cream, I'm asking myself, if I was operating from a place of being 100% whole, would I still do this or do this differently? And there could be some days I know that I'm doing it, and I'm creating an authentic relationship with whatever that thing is, and I'm okay with it because I have the awareness around it, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
a lot of the time, 90% of the time, I'll stop myself before I lean into something like that. But there is still roughly around 10% of the time where I'll still engage, and I'm okay with that because I'm not going to be super hard on myself, and I'm going to, acknowledge the awareness around it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Integrity. What if I am not staying in alignment with integrity? What am I sabotaging, and what story am I seeking to fuel? This goes back to embodiment. Hopefully you've watched the other video that we put out about attunement, embodiment, and action. Embodiment is bringing what you believe right down to a cellular level and then taking action in support of it. And when you become out of integrity with that embodiment, um, what are you sabotaging? Are you seeking to fuel the abandonment and rejection that might be rising up inside of you again? Um, yeah. So,
And it's so interesting because, like, when you'll start to recognize when you've been in the practice for a little while, that the more that you operate out of integrity, the more experiences, once again, that law of attraction, the more experiences and relationships that you're going to call in with people who are also operating from a place of integrity. And it's like this whole thing is just so beautiful because, like, all of these things are such key components. And once you kind of start on this journey and you start feeling what it feels like embodying integrity and what it means to take action in integrity, you can't turn that switch back off. You can't go backwards and become blissfully unaware or blissfully naive to this process, because you've now embodied it. You've felt it on a visceral level. You've felt your cellular body wake up. You know your physiology is starting to shift. And so when things aren't in integrity, or when you're acting out of integrity, you're going to start to feel that shift within you, and it becomes really uncomfortable. It's
mhm,
not a pleasant feeling. And then that responsibility factor comes in, where it's like, okay, like, now I'm responsible for myself. I'm responsible for the actions that I'm taking, and I'm responsible for how I feel. So if I notice that I'm acting out of integrity and not owning my whole self and not showing up the way that I feel I can, or the way I innately know I should, it becomes unbearable. And so you really start to see that shift, where it's like, now I'm chasing the sensation of integrity. Now I'm chasing the sensation of authenticity, because nothing awakes your spirit the way that those things do. And
mm,
so fully leaning into that integrity and recognizing that that's the only way there is to be. If you want to bring out your highest potential, if you want to have the law of attraction work in your favor, if you want the relationships with yourself and your external world to flourish, start acting out of integrity.
mm.
It's the
That
fundamentals of
simple.
it all.
Totally. Love it. Are you okay if we move to spiritual bypassing?
I love spiritual bypassing. So
Take it away. Take it away, Lynn.
so spiritual bypassing is a phrase that's kind of been tossed around over this last little while. It's kind of one of those keywords that's floating around, and Tammy and I have a really interesting perspective around spiritual bypassing, because
There's a book by Robert Augustus Masters called Spiritual Bypassing. I'm just putting that out there.
awesome. Okay. So put it in the show notes.
Yes, exactly, right?
And so essentially spiritual bypassing is the opposite end, and the swing of the pendulum, going into that other end of kind of living in la la land. You've left interpretation, you've left the sensation of the body, and you have swung completely into the area of surrender in the soul. And now you're not embodied, and you're just kind of floating around. And all of it comes down to the question of, what am I trying to avoid? What am I trying not to feel? That's the same thing of quieting the mind. We don't want to quiet the mind. We want to bring it in and bring it in as part of our wholeness. And so once again, going back to that addictions and validations, what am I using in an inauthentic way to avoid feeling something, or avoid being an observer of my actions? What am I trying to avoid, and taking responsibility for myself?
Hmm.
And so, really getting clear on how you're using those practices. One of the biggest ones that I see is the morning routines or the meditation. People will go directly into that space, but they're not able to bring the awareness or the lessons of that into their daily life. And so, what good is a practice if you can't take it into the game and play it on an actual court?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a recovered spiritual bypasser.
And what was that experience like for you? How did you recognize
I
it?
learned to play the shruti box and chant with, and all this crazy stuff. You know, um, it's so interesting because when you first find spiritual bypassing, you think it's the answer to all your prayers.
Mhm.
You think it's the answer to all of how you've not how whole you've not been feeling. And so you find spiritual bypassing and you go, oh my God, like it's so wonderful to feel so in love and so happy. And so, until it runs out. Right?
Right.
Because again, when you create an authentic relationship with things, they fall apart. And so if you're using spiritual bypassing as a way to feel whole and still eclipsing the other parts of yourself, it's going to fall apart. And that's essentially what it did for me. And I remember in the height of the spiritual bypassing, I remember saying to myself, you're just one of those people that you have no choice, but you have to meditate. You have to meditate every day in order to feel whole. And even in just saying that, I didn't realize that's such an addictive statement, right? Like it's such
Mhm.
that's me showing the universe how addicted I am to spiritual like practices that didn't have me looking at the reason why I needed to create the spiritual practices in the first place. So
Mhm.
for me, the work has now become, okay, so what's created the feelings of me not feeling 100% worthy. And that is the focus of the work. The focus of the work is about intentionally activating the parts of myself that either my spiritual bypassing at times took me out of wholeness for, or my mind-based functioning, which was, also at one point in life took me out of my wholeness. And so that's the work.
Totally. And like, just on what you said there, when we're in the mind and rooted in that interpretation phase, it's almost that narrative of like, we're anticipating the worst. Everything that could go wrong is going wrong. Spiritual bypassing is the world of everything is perfect. Nothing's ever going to go wrong. I'm okay up in here. And when we meet in the middle and come back to wholeness, it's letting go of any outcome. And so it's, saying, yes, I see that the potential for failure is here, or I see that I may have the potential of having my abandonment and rejection triggered, and being okay with that as being part of the picture,
Hmm.
and really coming back to the space of, yeah, something might go wrong, something might happen that might detour me or derail me from what my path is, but being okay and coming back to this place of faith that regardless of what takes place, it's all meant to be exactly as it is. So
Exactly.
it's not dismissing the dark, and it's not just, dismissing the light. It's bringing those things together and saying, I'm okay with whatever happens, and I'm excited and grateful for the opportunities they're going to unfold that I have no control over,
Yeah, and something you said just triggered me to remember something. It's like I can remember that when I was in the place of spiritual bypassing, I was engaged in spiritual practices because I was looking for deeper connection, right? But here's the thing, in that process, I'm still not surrendering. I'm still not fully surrendering. So I'm not attuning to the language of the soul. I'm trying to work on the symptom, one of the
Mhm.
symptoms of
Yes.
right? And so deeper connection is a symptom of how willing I am to lean into surrender. And so
Yeah.
if I'm not willing to lean into surrender, of course, my connection is still going to be in and out. And I think that's kind of where the relationship with my spirituality started to have cracks or like holes in the barrel, because it was like, here I am, I'm working every day so hard on this deeper connection, but why am I still waking up in the morning and having to do these practices in order to connect?
Hmm.
Not
And
realizing that how I actually really connect, I'll use the word God because that's the word that I use, but it's higher power, it's source, it's divine, whatever that word is for you. For me, it's God. It's like, so if I want to really connect with God at a deeper level, I don't have to do spiritual practices in order to do that, what I need to do to incorporate God into my everyday life so that I'm actually a walking meditation as opposed to having to sit and actually do a meditation. But the only way for me to do that is I got to fully lean into surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got to wake up in the morning and get excited for the adventures that are about to unfold that I have zero control over.
Yeah. And recognizing too that everything comes back to self. And, spiritual bypassing is about reaching outside of yourself. So once again, having that great love outside of yourself rather than within yourself. Either you see God in everything or you see God in nothing.
Nothing.
And so if you're looking for that deeper connection to God, go back into yourself. Start to feel where God resides within you. Start to feel where that wholeness is within you and create that deeper practice within yourself. You are all that you have ever needed. And so it's just about creating that deeper relationship with yourself and bringing it back inward rather than searching for these external things that are supposed to help you.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. So leaning in, breaking through the resistance ceiling and opening ourselves up to growth. Like even reading this, I just feel like this glass ceiling is breaking above us.
So
I
it's
love
interesting because a few years ago, I got a book for Christmas. It was the 5 Minute Journal, written by UJ Ramdas. And I'm reading, and I met UJ a few months before I got this book. And so, but I didn't know he wrote this book. And so I'm reading this book, and it was Christmas Day, and I opened it up, and the introduction, it says, resistance is the opposite of growth.
Mhm.
I'm like, whoa.
Boom.
Right? Like, and then and then somebody said to me, a little while after that, like, if you could tell something to your 7-year-old self, go back and tell something to your 7-year-old self, what would it be? I'm like, that resistance is the opposite of growth. Because
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time in my sympathetic nervous system, in the fight or flight zone, resisting the growth that was available to me. And so I kind of see it like this, like here's under here is the resistance, and over here is the growth at the top, right?
Mhm.
Resistance down here, growth up here. And so because we operate from this training ground of abandonment and rejection, we the growth is foreign to us, right? It's like, I don't know what it looks like on the other side. So I'm going to continue to abandon and reject myself. And every time I come up against the ceiling, I'm going to back off and come up
Mhm.
against the ceiling. And the embodiment piece is really about lifting that ceiling and moving into the growth thing. And the only way to do that is to lean in.
Yeah,
And
1,000%.
it sounds like it's an intellectual concept because we say lean in and people go, what the bleep does that mean? And I'm like, but your soul knows what it's like to feel like to lean in, because it's a complete act of surrender.
Mhm.
Because leaning in is you saying, I don't know what it looks like on the other side, but here's the thing, I'm willing to experience the growth potential that is available for me by leaning in and surrendering to whatever that is.
Mhm. It's so funny because like one of the things that I experienced in my life is um I'm more of a homebody. I like to be by myself. And one of the challenges that I have had or that I gave myself was to create more of a tribe and create more of a community and call people into me that resonated with what I'm about rather than living in this world of like nobody understands me, nobody gets me, that type of narrative. And so one of the challenges that I presented to myself was to join these weekly community events of like-minded individuals coming together. And it was one of the scariest things ever. For one, I'm the type of person who I'll sign up for something and I instantly want to get out of it because I don't know who else is showing up. So I'm going to be there by myself. Then I'm going to a new place. Where am I going to park my car? Am I going to get lost? Do I need to show up 30 minutes early just so I can navigate my way? And then I'm going to go and sit in my car until the time. And then maybe I'll go in, or maybe I'll like convince myself to leave. And so one of those things that I had to do was like really like burst through that resistance and be like, this is going to be so good for me if I can do it. This challenge happened to me just before COVID hit. And so it was really interesting to see how this event played out for me because I forced myself into these situations. And then I left the first meeting feeling like I was on the top of this mountain. I was like, how have I never signed up for these events? How have I never like put myself out there? Because I tell you, when COVID hit, that was my community. Those were the people who are putting on online events, who are doing the check-ins and seeing like, how are you doing?
Yeah,
They were the motivators posting positive content and like keeping people's spirits up. And I was like, wow, had I not had this network of people going into COVID, I would have just been stuck in that thing of like, nobody understands me, nobody gets me, I'm stuck in my solitude, and I stay in that hermit lifestyle. And so it really is about like embodying and embracing whatever's going to come, and not only focusing on the fear, but like once you've actually broke through that ceiling and leaned into that, how does that feel? Like, how does that
totally.
empowerment feel? And how does it feel to take action in support of yourself?
Hmm.
And what are the benefits of it? You know, so often we go through things and then we still recall the narrative that's negative, rather than being like, it was so great. It made me feel this way. All of these sensations rose up in me. And for once, like I finally felt like my authentic self.
Yeah,
That is so powerful for helping you lean in every other opportunity. And so it doesn't have to be these big grandiose gestures. It could be something so small, like just changing up your routine or driving a different way to work or whatever it might be, just changing things a little bit so that you can become confident and familiar with that feeling and sensation of breaking through that ceiling into growth,
yeah,
and having the universe respond with support in the actions that you're taking.
totally. I love people who, I'm really attracted to people who use their lives as an experiment. Michael Singer, who wrote the Surrender Experiment, basically his whole life has been an exercise in surrender, and then he shares it with us, and we all get to learn from him. And I just read a book by Matthew McConaughey called Green Lights, and he's used his life up to this point as an experiment in moving forward or leaning in. And so I just, it's an incredible book. I read it in less than a day, and I just did a book club on it. And it really does give you, because some of us are visceral learners, right? Some of us need to, see somebody else embodying it before we're willing to embody it, which again
Yeah.
is mind-based functioning. But for me, like the importance of leaning in, if it takes you to read somebody else's story and see how willing they were to lean in and surrender and how it's worked out for them, then by all means do it. And so that book called Green Lights was really an exercise of understanding what leaning in is from an embodiment perspective, so that you can start to now work to embody it yourself.
I love it. I love it.
Compassion, compassion is not feeling sorry for somebody in my world, in this world. Compassion is, I can own where I operate from, abandonment and rejection, and recognize that everyone else is also operating from this place of abandonment and rejection. And so I feel like for me, it's like the practice has been really just having compassion for where people are operating from, and then the actions that they take, because there's a lot of people out there, that a lot of folks out there that don't have the awareness around where they're operating from. And so they're going to take action in support of supporting that, right? To fueling
Mhm.
that fire, as opposed to taking action in support of working towards living a whole, happy, being a more whole person. And so, yeah, so I think it's like, for me, it's just really having compassion. And so when I see people take actions that I know, that I feel like might be supporting their abandonment rejection, I'm not sitting in judgment of them.
Mhm.
I'm not saying, you know, not so nice things about a person, or I'm not, you know, creating a gossipy situation. When I'm stepping back and I'm feeling the love emanating from my heart for the fact that this person also has a training ground that they've been operating from. And without the awareness to choose differently, that's their path, that's their journey. So that's kind of where I sit with compassion.
Totally. And it's so funny that you brought that up, because that's probably one of the biggest triggering things that we recognize people who are kind of going through this process is they've become so hyper aware of their own training ground and how their actions and reactions are a reflection of that training ground. But then we also want to jump in and start being over aware of how other people are acting. And that's where that we want to fix them comes in. And it's like, now this person is doing this, this person's acting out of this way, and this person's living in their training ground. And it's about having that compassion to say, like, that person is doing perfectly as they are because that's their
Their
part of
journey.
the journey. And
Totally.
so it's about surrendering into that idea of not having an attachment to an outcome or how we expect other people to show up for us.
Totally.
You know,
Nope.
it's an opportunity for us to look deeper as like, okay, if we have recognized where this person is operating from, why did we become so heightened to, like, so aware of that? Like, what is that triggering inside of us? Are we still not confident in our own ability to, like, go out and, own where we're operating from, that we have to nitpick at where other people are operating from?
Yeah. So for
And
me,
so,
yeah, it's like you're going to hold space
yeah, and it's like,
for people
no
to
one wants
recognize
to.
that's their journey.
Yeah, no one wants to walk through a botanical garden and only look at one type of flower. Like, we are all different flowers, and if we can remove our own judgment and our own interpretation from that and look at a bigger perspective, we all have to come forward with these different puzzle pieces and these different aspects and personalities for the world to work. Like, that's what creates this dynamic, vital, like, ever evolving environment that we live in. And so embrace the uniqueness, embrace the traits that other people bring forward, embrace that people are operating from a different space that you are, or are in different versions or stages of their evolvement. That's what makes this world beautiful. It's
So true.
painting a picture with every color rather than one or two. And so just being able to, like, look at it from that perspective is, once again, like, breaking through that ceiling that everything should look a certain way or be a certain way.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, I have so enjoyed this
Me
conversation.
too.
It's so cool because, like, we, obviously we're the developers of this work, of the work that we do. And, and, but, sometimes it's just really nice to hear it again.
Totally. And honestly, you can hear this stuff over and over, and it's going to hit you differently every time. It's that act of embodying.
Totally.
It's one thing to intellectualize this list of fundamentals and a completely different thing to embody it. So if you have to come back and re-listen to this video, 10, 15 times, or have this list posted on your bathroom or on your fridge or in your car, just as a simple reminder every day of, like, focus on this, like, bring this into your awareness, bring this into your daily practice.
Totally.
It's super beneficial. And so no matter how many times we talk about this, something new comes from it every time. And we did create this, but we're still learning
We're
all the
always
time.
shifting and evolving. We're remaining open and curious so that we can, deepen the work. It just continually goes deeper. Because I remember initially when we were trained to believe the mind was thinking, that the body was feeling, and that the soul was knowing. And
Yeah.
even we've pulled back layers on that, and we've deepened the work. And it's the language of interpretation, the language of sensation, the language of surrender. And so and next year we may have a whole different perspective on that, because we want to remain open and curious and allow the universe to work with us
Yeah.
to be able to grow in this work. So
Yeah. I
anyway, I
love it.
appreciate you, Lindsay. This is so amazing. Thank you.
So good. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.